Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Martin, and tonight we are talking about the vehicles of Supernatural. Beyond Baby, you know, Baby definitely deserves all the love, got her own episode. We know how much Dean cherishes her, and we know how much Sam cares too, even though he doesn't like to let on. But there were a lot of other cool cars and some not so cool over the course of the season. So let's talk about the vehicles of Supernatural. But first, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Janet.
Hi, I'm Janet, Walden-West, and I write urban fantasy and contemporary and paranormal romance. And the paranormal definitely has some monsters and monster hunters in it.
Very good. Wrenn.
My name is Wrenn Simms. I'm a perennial con runner and costumer, and I am heavily into cars and other vehicles, and I grew up that way. My father took me to car shows the time I was a very small child. I always pick out the vehicles in anything I watch. I spent a half an hour figuring out every single car in the opening scene of Highlander. That's how bad I am. So let's have some fun tonight.
We will. And I'm Gail Martin, and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But all my modern worlds are ones where Sam and Dean could walk in and feel right at home. I love taking a look at the different vehicles in Supernatural, just like I love doing a deep dive on the characters, because the show was created with so much craft and love that I don't think anything was coincidental or superficial. They picked these things for a reason, and I love trying to figure out what that was. So, other than Baby, whom we love, and nobody puts Baby in a corner, but we're going to tuck her gently over to the side for now.
Nobody puts Baby in a corner.
You got one of the plushies. That's perfect. So, we'll just go round after round here. Other than Baby, what's the first vehicle that comes to mind for you, and what thoughts do you have about it, Janet?
This is a one-shot wonder, but it is Andy's van. That van with the charging polar bears and the barbarian and the wizard, you can never forget that, or Dean's reaction to it when he realized he had traded his baby for it.
I missed those conversion vans with the original art on the side. They were... I remember thinking they were so cool when I was.
Well, we were in our teens, though, in early 20s. They were used. They were usually your parents had the van. You got it. You repainted it with that on the side, and you avoided the boys who had those vans.
Yes. Avoid the boys. Yes. And Wrenn, I want to get to all your thoughts about the garage and the bunker, but for now, what's the first one that comes to mind?
The one that's I've got from behind, Death's 1959 Cadillac Coupe de Ville. It is lovely. License plate, bye-bye. It was great. It was perfect. Its opening scene is iconic. I have loved this car since I first saw it at a car show as a small child. It's beautiful. It's
and it is
favorites.
Perfect and kind of ghostly and intimidating, and you could stab somebody on those fins.
The only one that could be even better possibly for Death would have been a 63 Imperial. The big Chrysler boats that were just round, and they were like the 59 Caddy, but they were rounder. They were like, with a bigger with a big engine. Well, not bigger. They got bigger ones than these. But yeah.
Very nice. I've got to say Cass's Pimpmobile. That Cadillac that Cass stole or hot wired or took off of Bobby's salvage yard.
A 78 Lincoln Continental Mark V.
Okay.
It was a 78 Lincoln Continental Mark V. It was, the Pitmobile. I had, in my late teens, I had a 76 Eldorado convertible my father had, and a very dear friend had an 81 Coupe de Ville that was white with plush interior. And our friends called them the Pitmobiles. And and Castiel's car just fits right in. It is a Pitmobile.
It is. My dad bought a secondhand 72 Eldorado. And those things were an aircraft carrier. I mean, it had that huge engine. So you had that vroom. It had the leather seats. It had AM, FM radio, which was, yeah.
You floated on the road.
Oh, it did. And I remember he would never let my mother drive it, but he'd occasionally let me drive it if he was tired coming home from vacation. And I just remembered there was no way to know where your hood and your trunk stopped because they kind of went to infinity. And
my father put the Eldorado convertible in the garage, and for my mother had to do the whole trick of the string and the tennis ball.
Oh yeah,
you wouldn't hit the front of the garage.
Or the fishing bobber, yeah, because you couldn't see your edges. But boy, on a straightaway, that could go fast. So yeah, I feel that kinship with Cass's car every time I see it. And ours was gold too, so it probably, looking back, it probably did look like a Pimp-mobile. Janet, what next?
Ooh, I'm on a van kick apparently, because my next one is the Mystery Machine. Our Scooby episode, that was my favorite. When you have made it on to Scooby, you have made it.
That's true. Wrenn?
Well, I'm a little Mopar girl, so once you restore your first Chrysler or first Mopar, you're stuck. I absolutely adore the short-term time he had the 1970 Dodge Challenger, the RT440, in the 7th season. I mean, the 7th season is an ode. If you watch it as a car nut, it's an ode to car nuts. There are so many interesting and some stupid cars that they drive while they're on the lam. While Leviathan Dean and Leviathan Sam are off in an Impala, they're driving all sorts of things. And my favorite is the Challenger, which, according to everything I've been able to find, was a 440. So that was the second largest. So only the engine just down from the Hemi. So that would, and I mean, when they called it a piece of shit, it wasn't. If it had the 440 in it, it was an RT. Oh my God. Yeah, it needed a paint job, but it was a good car.
I'm impressed. That is such an interesting insight, because I'm not a car nut. I'm the person that the first time I was out driving with my soon-to-be husband, and I said, "Can I pull out?" And he said, "Yeah." Right after the end, he gave me the model number and the name of it, and it's like, just tell me if it's the blue car, or I'll get us killed.
I do that to Keith all the time. No, my husband is Keith DeCandido, who wrote the first, third, and fourth Supernatural tie-in novels. So yeah, I've got my own little I take home for Supernatural, who lives with me. But he's a New Yorker. Put the key in, turn, it goes. That's all he cares about. He doesn't care about anything else about a car, whereas I'm there giebling about things.
So that is really interesting, and I want to hear more about those season 7 cars that I totally ignored. But I'm going to mention the Mustang in My Heart Will Go On. After Balthazar didn't sink the Titanic, and we have an alternate timeline, the boys have a Mustang instead of the Impala. And of course, it's an in-joke because Kripke originally thought about giving them a Mustang, nice muscle car, lots of rooms, but the trunk isn't really big enough to hold bodies. And as you know, you get Crowley in the back, you got junk in your trunk. You need to have bodies in there along with a whole bunch of weapons. But it was fun seeing the boys tool around in that Mustang for a little bit.
What's lovely is they stayed with the same year. That's a 67 fastback. So it's still like the Impala, it's a 67. So they stay with the 67 Mustang fastback, which is also real cool for the car geeks that are watching the show.
There is apparently a whole nother level of this show that I have.
So really? Season 7, I watched it first for the story, then I watched it again for the cars.
I will admit to having missed some details the first time through because I was looking at the boys, but I'm looking that closely at the cars, and now I'm going to have to do that. Back to you, Janet.
Okay, what's our question?
Again, favorite cars.
Oh, it's not a car, but when I rewatched the series the first time, I noticed the trucks. They have a truck for every reason, whether it's that jacked up mess of John's or the murder truck, the black ghost truck. When Dean is living a normal life without Sam, and he has, just like an everyday Ford work truck to go in. Bobby's, the first time you see Bobby's place, here's this junked out 50s truck with a Rottweiler lying on the hood.
Yep.
So I'm pretty sure they cleaned out every junkyard in Vancouver over the time they were filming there.
That's very possible. Wrenn?
Well, the Bobby's truck, if I remember correctly, let me see. Oh no, Dee's truck was in '88. I remember where it was. I've got notes. But yeah, Bobby's truck is interesting. I like Bobby's Chevelle. You see that twice. You see it with when he's off hunting. The 71 Chevelle. It actually is. They used it for the first episode, the 71 Chevelle, but the second time you see it, it's a 72 Chevelle. Different. The front grille has 1 bar for 71 and 2 bars for 72. But it's an SS with a 454 big block in it. It is a phenomenal car. Of course, it needs a paint job. Bobby's driving it. He doesn't care what it looks like. But that is a gorgeous, gorgeous. You know, it's the first. It's one of the first year for the Chevrolet was 71 for the Chevelle, and that was gorgeous. I also have cars I hate in the show too. We can get to there later if we have time.
Yes, definitely. Well, you know, I'm sticking with Horseman here, and War's red Mustang was gorgeous and perfect. You know, if he's riding a red horse and it's a Mustang, that just was so fitting, just like that white car for death. So I loved that, and it just fit his personality. He was so cocky and so overconfident, and of course he's going to drive a totally tricked out sports car. So yeah, that was, and it was a pretty car. Janet?
Speaking of the Horseman, that horrible, disgusting, fly-infested station wagon that Pestilence drove into town in. Like, I don't know anyone that loved a station wagon, and then with the add-on trash and bugs, he nailed it.
Yes, that was really perfect and very in character. Wrenn?
Okay, then what else do I like? Well, when they go back in time, Elliot Ness drives a Roadmaster, 44 Roadmaster, that Dean gets to drive once. And you can tell he's so happy to drive it. So yeah, Elliot Ness's 1944 Buick Roadmaster is a beautiful example of a beautiful classic car.
Oh, and the wardrobe in that episode was beautiful too.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to go for that little Vespa scooter that the vampire in Monster movie drove. You know, big, scary Universal monster. The whole episode's filmed in black and white. It's very noir. It feels like those classic Universal monster movies. And then the big bad vampire goes puttering off on this little scooter. And it was just such a great signal not to take this as seriously. This is not what it seems. But it was such a contrast to this guy who should have been getting in this, you know, black stretch limo or something very intimidating and very scary. And instead he's puttering off on this little scooter. Janet?
I'm always struck by what a great job they did using cars as a reflection of the character, another part of their personality. And the first time that really stood out was, I think it was the first time we met Bella, and she had that Mercedes. So here she is, perfectly polished in her Mercedes Benz in the land of junkers and muscle cars.
Yeah. Wrenn?
Yeah, that was a 2007 silver Mercedes-Benz SL 550. And I'm sorry if I say that. I grew up driving Mercedes. My father had the representation for their moving trucks, so he had to drive Mercedes. And that was a gorgeous, gorgeous, expensive Mercedes. I think, let's get down to Dorothy. Dorothy's Indian. She has Indian Junior Scout 600cc V2. It's an anachronism. She could not have had that. It's a lovely, lovely motorcycle, but it was 37, 39, and she was imprisoned by the witch in 1935. But still, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous motorcycle. And so I can forgive the 2 year difference of it being a possible thing for her to drive. But that is a gorgeous Indian. I think the other two motorcycles in the bunkers are Indians, but there's not enough for me to be able to tell at this point from all of the images, stills that I've been looking at and finding and screenshotting. I got the rest of the cars though, well, except for the oldest one. Back to you guys.
Okay. I think speaking of how the cars kind of gave us an insight into the characters, it struck me that every time Sam is separate from Dean, except for when he's soulless, the cars that he hot wires, steals, makes off with are as broken as he is. Because whenever he and Dean are apart, he's not in good shape. Dean's always got the Impala, except for when Sam says, I'm not good right now. I need to take a break. And Dean offers him the only thing he has to give, which is, do you want to take the Impala? And Sam turns him down.
He offers him his heart.
It's all he has. And Sam turns him down and hitchhikes off. But that's, if you know what the Impala means, that's a huge moment. But ever after that, when Sam's boosting cars, they're in as bad shape as he is. And I think that that's not an accident on the part of the scripts. Sam's conscience, he's going to pick the least expensive car that isn't going to damage anybody too badly. But I think it's very representative of, he's picking old cars, he's picking junkers, he's picking cars that are really not in good shape. And so again, one of those crazy attention to detail things that makes this show something that we can do this many panels on and still find details to talk about. Janet.
Speaking of Sam, when Dean finds out that Sam is back, and what is Sam driving but that shiny, soulless, perfect Charger. I mean, it like you said, it is nothing like he has ever stolen before. It's nothing that he's ever been in before. And that whole episode just feels so off. The first time I watched it, it was like, they're not hugging. You just found out he's alive. He's back, from hell, basically, and you're not even hugging. And then you get in deeper. And that Charger is the perfect representation of Sam with no soul. It's fast, it's shiny, there's nothing personal about it. There are no toy soldiers rattling around in the vents. So that one was spot on too.
Yeah, okay. The 2006 Dodge Charger SRT8, sorry. Yeah, in black, completely soulless. You see some of the the videos of the bloopers reels. They had a hell of a time getting those doors to slam at the same time. When the one scene, they had to get them both closed at the same time. What else do I interesting? Well, let me see. I got lists of things and things you have already mentioned. See things like, and the Mustang. There were. We talked a little bit about it. You already talked about it. Janet did. When Dean is trying to be normal. He's trying to be normal. He's driving a 1988 Ford F-250 truck with Lisa and Ben trying to be normal, and it's the average run-of-the-mill work truck. That's a standard work truck that there's thousands of, and that's what he's driving. He wants to be the everyman, the everyday working man, and that's it. And that was a perfect choice. And you were very right on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let me see. Now, other trucks though, Donna's truck. That's one of the ones I like to see. Only see it a couple times. It's 2014 Ford F-150 SVT Raptor. It is a big engine, big ass truck, and little bitty blonde Donna's driving it very happily.
How about Frank Devereaux's RV? I mean, Frank is out there off the grid. He's got all the monitors. He's got all the tech. And he's crammed into this tin can of an RV. And it's just so perfectly Frank. It's not a really fancy RV. It's not a new RV. It's but like Frank, it's been around the block and it's still chugging. And it kind of reminds me of when I was a kid and some friends would have, parents had an RV or maybe an old house trailer that wasn't being used anymore, but it was still parked off, back on the back end of the lot. And it was falling apart, but we could play in it. And Frank's RV kind of reminded me of that. Definitely not a luxury model. No. Janet?
Oh, Garth, when we first meet him, it's not an El Camino, and Wrenn can tell us what it is, but that half car, half pickup bed thing. Garth is trying so hard to be a hunter and to be cool, and here he is in this car that just misses it by a mile. I don't think it could have gotten any further away from cool, unless maybe he had a VW Bug with like the little eyelashes on it.
Yeah, it's a Ford Ranchero Squire is what it is, but it's the equivalent of an El Camino. It's a Ford. Yeah. It's when the Ford tried to make a El Camino-like thing. It was a Ford Ranchero Squire. Yeah, there are not that many of them. They didn't last very long.
In that period where somebody thought it was a good idea to have, the car on the front and the truck on the back, and it's kind of like a mullet, yeah. It just never quite worked.
No. It is a mullet.
Yeah.
Okay, the one thing I want to say is, like, season 7, we had an awful lot of really good cars, but you had a couple of clunkers, and it's interesting to note the position of them. When Leviathan, Sam, and Leviathan Dean are off in an Impala, they have to drive something else. Sam and Dean drive something else. The first thing they pick up is an absolute disaster of a vehicle. After that, they get better. They start, most of the rest are sports cars, but the first one is not. And I think it's very important that it's not. The first one is Pontiac Acadian. We don't have them down in the States. So basically it was a Chevette. Remember the Chevettes of the 80s? Stupid little hatchback cars? I had one. I had one accidentally. I'll explain a little bit if we have time. Basically, Ma Bell broke up in 1985. They sold it to whole fleets, and their fleets were completely full of white Chevettes and blue Oldsmobile Delta 88s. That was it. My dad bought a couple of them to resell. I had one for a while. I threw a rod in 1987 with one. But it was a stupid little itty-bitty putt-putt that barely got out of its own way. That is the first car they steal to drive after they're on the lam, because Leviathan Sam and Leviathan Dean are off killing people, and they're trying to hide. After that, they get better cars. The next car after that is the Challenger. But the first one is this itty-bitty stupid putt-putt. And it sort of makes sense. They had to get a vehicle somehow. They ended up stealing that. But it is nothing. In the state of their mind and everything, I mean, it's possible to say the state of their mind probably. But after that, the cars get more interesting and even in better shape throughout the season. I have a list, but it might not be time to go through, but if you look at it, watch season 7 again, think about his car. The cars get, if you know the cars, they're better cars and they're better in shape as the season goes on.
And I definitely want to come back to that, just like I want to come back to the bunker. So we'll catch a couple more here, and then we're going to set you loose. Except for the very last one in Party on Garth, they're driving a Pacer. But all the way up, they're going up to they go through a Mercury Cougar, the first year of the Blue Special Deluxe, all these really cool cars, a Dodge Charger, Pontiac Firebird, and an AMC Pacer. And that's the end of the season. Well, this isn't a vehicle, but it's in the vehicle. And, when Dean comes back in season 4 and he finds out that Sam has put an iPod in the Impala, and it's like, I didn't give her to you. You to douche her up, dude. And he kind of rips it off. He throws it in the back. And I read somebody's take on that. I don't remember whether it was in a fan article or a piece of fan fiction, but it was like, here's Sam. He's got the Impala, which is constantly reminding him, as if he needed to be reminded, that Dean is gone. He can't stand to listen to Dean's tapes because that would just make it worse. He can't stand to listen to silence because that would just make it worse. Out in the middle of nowhere, especially at that time, the radio is just going to be in and out. It's not going to be good. So his iPod was a way of coping with the grief of not only losing Dean, but losing the whole soundtrack to his life and losing his companion in the car, like we see when he goes out as old Sam at the end and sits in the Impala in the garage, and he's reliving the best times. So I thought that was very poignant, and kind of adds a little more weight to that whole scene, which of course is played for laughs in the episode. But there's, our show always has layers. Janet, other thoughts?
It seems like so often the vehicle that belongs to whichever character or that they're stuck with at the time is also serving as their home, whether it's, you're on the road so often you have to crash in the back of the car and get a couple of hours of sleep, or if it is one of the RVs. But with Benny, especially, and I will go on record as saying I'm a Benny girl, he did not get enough screen time. But after he is back topside and he's trying to reintegrate and he's watching out, for his last surviving relative, and here he's driving another ratty truck with, camper cover on the back, and because he's not vampire enough, for a nest, he's not human enough for a house or an apartment. So here he has this in-between home vehicle, just like he is stuck in between.
Nice. Interesting insight.
Cool.
Wrenn?
What was the question again?
Oh, we're still going through vehicles. If you want to, continue on
in the
season
bunkers,
7.
that I can't figure out what the other two motorcycles are yet. I'm still looking. But as far as I can tell, the far right in, I'm not certain yet. It's a very old, something in the 20s. The grill is still eluding me. But in front of it is a red 1958 MGA convertible. Then there is a green, I think it's a 56 T-Bird. And then the one closest is, I think it's about a 34 to 35 Plymouth PJ Deluxe sedan is what it looks like. But that's what we see on the left side of it. I am very certain of the T-Bird and the MGA. I'm not certain of the year, but definitely a Plymouth from the front grille. And for that size, it has to be a sedan. It looks like a PJ from the way the front end looks. And that's what I think it is. But I'm really trying to hunt down those motorcycles now. Motorcycles are the hardest thing because there's so very minor little itty bitty differences. And there's so many ones that look like each other. When you come to the 30s, your Harley Davidson looks like your Indian. You have to see the fenders to tell the difference. And there's really not enough in those videos to tell me. But I'm really, really trying to find that first car is something odd. It's not normal. The first really old car on the far right.
Now, is there anything that you picked up that was particularly interesting or unique or had a story behind it with those cars? Why would they pick those cars in particular?
I have no clue why they picked them, but there's some collection. There are cars on some collection somewhere. They're in too good a shape for that. They basically borrowed cars from a collection. Whose? Nobody. I've not been able to find out in my searches, but they're really pretty. One of the things that I noticed that was noticed by some other people, one of the cars that they drove in their On the Lam 7 season was also seen. They drove a 69 Buick Special Deluxe in The Adventures of Babysitting. But it also seems to have been in an episode in the 4th season. The same car, the same color, it's maroon, and it is a 69 Buick Special Deluxe outside the Toreador. What's going on here? Is there a story behind the fact that the same car that they stole in around episode 11 in season 7 is sitting outside the hotel in episode 18, season 4? Now, if they'll ever let Keith write another tie-in novel, I might push him to see if he wants to figure that out. But it's a cool thing to look at. Like somebody involved with the show owns that car.
Yeah.
I want to know who it is.
Yeah. Well, I love the VW bus that John was going to buy before Dean, who has gone back in time, intervenes and talks him out of.
Usually that vehicle is much more expensive than the Impala was.
Yeah.
And there's no way it would have been cheaper in real life in 1973.
Well, and I think it's also fun that in the Winchesters, the new prequel series, Carlos drives a VW bus. And so, you know, now Mary's got her VW bus basically because one of her best friends has it, but it's totally tricked out like you would expect an early 70s, you know, van to be, with the beads and the carpet and kind of stoner stuff. And
in the Supernatural episode, that's somebody's restored toy. Those are expensive. My first husband was a mechanic of sorts, and his best friend ran the VW restoration shop in Delaware. And I know a lot about VWs and the kit cars and the buses. And that bus is a rare one, with windows up top. 21 window VW bus is a rare one. Somebody's toy. Somebody spent a lot of money to fix that thing up. And the prices on the vehicles in that episode are dead wrong for that time period. The Impala would have been cheaper than that. The Impala would have been maybe, especially driven by a Bible salesman. Driven by a Bible salesman, it would have been beat to hell, our mileage wise. It would not have been, I forget the price it was, it would have been half that at that time period. It was only about $3,000 brand new.
Yeah.
And then it would have been I think it's 2000 is what it's on. It would have been around 1,500, 1,200, somewhere in that range. And the bus would have been more expensive because it was a more expensive vehicle to start with, and a rarer one, and it was in perfect shape. And its use this is before the oil crisis. They wouldn't care. The use of that bus would have been much more useful than they would. Yeah. So basically, I have my own issues with some of the things how it's written. But this happens but you got to be a car nut to have these issues. And there aren't that many of us, but there are enough of us, but there aren't that many of us.
Well, you know, it was funny because those of us who grew up with some of these cars take some things for granted, but I saw somebody make a comment maybe it was on Twitter. They were totally blown away when one of the rare times we see Dean stop to get gas, and he pulls the license plate down and fuels the Impala behind the license plate. And they were like, dude, what is that? Why is he doing that? Did they customize that? And I was like, no, you sweet summer child. That's what
that's how we fed them in the past.
On all the big cars, that's how it used to work. But this person had just never seen a car that fueled like that. And they were...
I don't think it's legal to have it back there anymore. A lot of the changes in car design is because it became no longer legal for them to do that on new cars. You had to put it in a place where it'd be more protected from a rear end collision.
Yeah, the whole Pinto unsafe at any speed thing, you know, that's probably good not to have a car that blows up on impact. I mean, you know.
It was only 1 year. They fixed it for the next year. They really did, but it was killed the whole car. Just like, you know, Volvo's never sold not Volvo's, it was Nova's never sold in Spanish speaking countries.
Yeah, because
it doesn't go.
Doesn't go. Yeah. Well, neither did Matadors didn't do too well either because it means killer. So yeah. Some things just don't translate.
No, it amazes my kids who have finally started watching Supernatural, but it was just like a throwaway shot in one episode too, where changing the headlights, dimming them, they had to stomp on the button in the floorboard, and they're like, what is that? I know, and it's like, let me tell you, and let me tell you, you made sure exactly where it was in every one you drove, because otherwise you were stomping madly when you approached somebody on a back road.
There was a chrome button up. There was a chrome button up there on the left on the floorboards. You could not see. You had to reach for it.
Yeah.
And I remember being a kid, and you know, being a really little kid, and my dad would say, okay, pull my thumb, and then I'd pull his thumb and he'd make the lights go up, and he'd, okay, pull it again, I'd make the lights go down. It took me a long time, you know. I was just really little. It wasn't his thumb at all, but you know. That's when you start finding out your parents didn't completely tell you the truth, but it was fun while it lasted. Yes, nobody's seen one of those in a long time.
In the first season, before John Winchester dies, he drives a 1986 GMC Sierra Grande truck. That's his truck, and we never see it again. What happened to it? I don't know. Be a very useful truck to have. did Bobby end up with it?
Well, did John go through more than one truck? Because you mean not the car nut, they're all black to me.
Well, that was the last one we saw him with before he died, was the 86. Okay. And we know we see Bobby later with the truck that he mentioned earlier. That was a 68 Ford 350. So it was a work truck, a 68 Ford 350 with his dog on the front. Yeah.
What about in Lebanon when after the whole thing with the Pearl, John wakes up in the car? Is he in a car or is he in a truck?
He's in the Impala, I believe. Oh,
okay.
Yeah. He wakes up back in the Impala.
That's right.
Because the kids are still young.
All right. Mm-hmm. What else? Janet, do you have something else you want to bring up?
The only other like really emotional beats that involved, the characters and their cars, aside from, Baby, was Bobby driving instead of, one of his many rusted out Bondoed muscle cars or trucks, was after he was in the wheelchair when he had the mom van with, the wheelchair lift and the adjustment, so he could do brakes and all of that by hand. And that drove home his situation and how much had changed for him like nothing else could.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great pick. All right, Wrenn, tell us more about season 7 cars.
Well, we start out with the Palladian, which is a Chevette. The next we got is the Challenger, which is a step butt. That's the vehicle that Meg calls the piece of shit. It was rusted. It had 2 different color panels on the doors. After that, we see Bobby dies. Then after that, we see a 69 Buick Special Deluxe. That's an Adventures in Babysitting. That's the one that might also have been in the 4th season. So I want to know why. After then we had a really pretty 71 Buick Riviera for the Slice Girls. That was a very, very pretty car. I mean, they're in muscle cars. They're like constantly the Challenger, the Special Deluxe, the Riviera, the Cougar. The 73 Cougar is the last year the Cougar used the same body platform as the Mustangs. We're looking at muscle cars all the way throughout. I mean, up through the Pontiac and then a Dodge Charger, a 70 Dodge Charger. And then we end the season in a Pacer. It's like pretty. It's like, okay, stupid car, and then pretty car, Pacer. An emotional drop. If you think of it that way from a car person's standpoint, did they do it on purpose, or was it just what happened, what they had available? I don't know. Somebody needs to ask them.
Yeah.
Was season 7 purposely doing that with muscle cars, or were they just seeing what cars they can get a hold of per episode for fun to see whether their fan base would notice? If so, we did. Mm-hmm. Okay, some of us did.
Yeah,
but I need to, you watch the season again for the cars. The cars are gorgeous.
I will pay attention the next time. Did Jody ever drive anything except a police cruiser?
Question.
I have only seen her in a police cruiser. I can't find any records of anything other than driving the vehicle that the police department gave her.
Yeah, because
Donna has the pickup as the big truck. Mm-hmm. But I've only seen Jody in police cruisers when we've ever seen her in a vehicle. So.
Which to me just says that it's, if we're taking meaning out of people's choices of cars, that's Jody's identity. Jody is, yes, she was a wife and a mother. She's chosen to be kind of a foster mother to the girls, and honestly to Sam and Dean, even though the age difference isn't there, she's still mothering them. But at heart, she's a cop. That's who she is, and she takes her work home with her, like she takes the car home with her, because I don't think we've ever seen her driving anything else. And so I think that's an interesting insight there. Janet, who have we forgotten?
Claire.
Okay.
Yes, the girls, because when we see them, they're bent over some version of a muscle car, waiting for a monster to stop and help them on the side of the road, carrying on the family tradition.
Mm-hmm. But the only time we see Claire with a car was a Outback. I don't know what year it is. I haven't done research on that one. They're saying their second figure is some Outbacks don't change much in the 80s to the early 90s. So she's in some form of Outback, probably at that point, at that time period, an all-wheel drive one. But that's what she's in. And so that would be Donna influence probably to have, a vehicle that can get around in a lot of different areas. Reading into it, I might be overreading into it. But that's what I can find so far about Claire's car.
Well, we never saw Rowena drive anything, but I believe we did see her in a limo or two being chauffeured someplace. And that is just so Rowena.
Yeah.
Very much of the Scarlett O'Hara is God is my witness, I'll never be hungry again. And, she had been ground down. She was gonna take everything she could from the good life once she got back on top. And that's just so Rowena.
She always struck me as a Bentley kind of girl, a lovely silver Bentley, preferably with a chauffeur.
Mm-hmm.
She would love it, but I don't think she would have loved it.
Yes, a boy toy chauffeur that was eye candy as well as a good driver. Yeah, she so would have been there. Well, folks, we have covered a lot of interesting territory. And so before we wrap up, unless somebody's got a car they're dying to talk about that we haven't touched yet, please tell us where we can find you online. Janet.
I am everywhere on social media as Janet Walden-West. And if you go to my website, you can pick up the free first book in my urban fantasy series.
Awesome. Thank you. Wrenn?
Well, I'm Wrenn S on Twitter and Wrenn S on Post, WRENNS on both. I'm on Facebook, but I tend not to friend people who aren't friends of mine. And I don't do an awful lot that is public. I can be found through my husband, the writer Keith DeCandido. It's nice. I use him as secretary in this way, but yeah, whatever. But I'm not a writer. I'm an editor, but I'm not a writer. I do edit. And we're hopefully changing the writer thing this year. And that's really about it. But it's not what I do mostly. I mostly do other things.
And I'm pretty easy to find at gailzymartin.com, morganbryce.com, as long as you spell them right. You'll find me on all the socials under those. I also run the Supernatural TFWNC group here on Facebook, and I'm a columnist for the Winchester Family Business blog. But most of the time, you can find me here on Continual. So thank you so much for a fantastic evening. This was a lot of fun and a lot more depth than I ever dreamed we'd find in the cars, but so much fun.
You invited me, huh? You invited me.
I know. And thank you so much to all of you for watching and listening. We'll be back with more Supernatural. So we'll see you online.